And I want to remind you of the fact that this is the first political job that I've ever had. I spent most of my life in the pension investment management business. I was a citizen here, like some of you and others that you know. I was a person just as an employer, employing people, making payroll. Had other companies as well, including some in the metal fabrication business, extrusion businesses, software, just a variety of different things. I was an entrepreneur. But I've lived in this state for coming up on 20 years now, 18, almost 19 years. And I saw what is happening. And I'll tell you, by a show of hands, how many of you have worked in state government or county government or local government for more than 15 years, by a show of hands? Unbelievable number of people in this room. In fact, I would bet that's probably half of you. You've seen this coming too. You've seen this coming too. And what this is a day of reckoning with financial reality on many, many fronts. I had never studied political science. I wasn't a person who aspired to this. This wasn't what I was going to do when I grew up. I frankly find myself with a bit of a love-hate relationship with the world of politics. I realize and love and appreciate the importance and significance of it. But I frankly am as repulsed as the next person by how self-serving it has become, how oblivious it has become. I was struck by the words of the invocation that were given when we started this lunch. And the pastor was praying that we would have clarity, that we would be able to have wisdom and discernment to understand the task before us. And the task is many-headed. There are many parts of the task before us. And one of them is, how do we make Kentucky the greatest version of itself so that, in fact, it's not even as difficult to get somebody like a Brady Industries to realize that's where we want to go. My vision for Kentucky, and I've shared it with you, is that we become the engineering and manufacturing hub of excellence, bar none, in America. If that is to happen, certain things must fall into place. And among those things that must fall into place is we've got to get our financial house in order. If you've been in government for any period of time, you know this. You've seen it. You all literally wrestle with this at your level day in and day out. And for some of you, the burden of wrestling with this has become perhaps almost too much to bear. It has become crippling in some of your communities and counties, as we've seen coal severance dollars decline, as we've seen people moving, as we've seen a downturn in areas that have not bounced back as others seemingly have. Some of you are literally wrestling with budget constraints that are only being compounded by this concern about the pensions. I remind you of my background because this is why I ran for governor. One of the things that truly does sadden me is to have heard from folks that somehow there is a plan by this administration to somehow drive our pension systems into the ground. That is insane. That would be ridiculous. I want you to remember the fact that when I ran in every debate, I pounded the table for the need to save our pension system. And at every turn, I was maligned and mocked and or ridiculed and or disregarded on this topic by people who didn't want to go there. Well, we have kicked this can, and we have kicked this can, and we have kicked this can, and it's time to stop kicking the can. It's just that simple. And so when I ran, I made clear, if you go back and look at my blueprint for a better Kentucky, one of the things that I call for is saving this pension system. We've got to deal with financial and demographic reality in doing so. Since that time, in my first budget, I cut 9% out of everything in my administration that I could take out of, so that we could put more money into these pension systems, including the one that many of you, or if not all of you, are a part of, than had ever been put in the history of Kentucky. We put $1.2 billion in. And yet even then, we did meet ARC and ARC Plus on some plans, a little less than on others. But truth be told, it's important to understand, what is the ARC? It is a projection of how much we need to put in to prevent ourselves from getting farther behind. That's it. Meeting the arc alone does not save these pension systems. That's a harsh, sobering, but true reality. And so if in fact we don't meet the arcs, which at times we have not in this state in years past, we've only just dug deeper. You cannot get out of the hole if you don't stop digging. And so I ask of you a couple of things. I ask for your confidence. I have nothing whatsoever to gain by being in this position. And I have come to realize that in full measure, as has my wife and my 9 children. You know exactly what I'm talking about because you serve in similar jobs. But if we truly do work together, if we truly want Kentucky to be better, if we truly do put the public interest ahead of our own, we can make a change. And this is what I'm committed to doing. So I'm asking for your confidence that I am applying everything in my ability, and I am, to save this pension system. I also want to address something else that I've heard. There's a tremendous desire to remove CERS from KERS, and I appreciate that. And we're having very frank conversation about that. And while I won't speak to what decisions our legislature will or won't make, this is a very, very real topic of conversation, and one that will lead to a very thoughtful resolution on this front. I can't predict exactly what that will be, but it is very, very much being discussed. The reason people are talking about why they want to take this out is because we're well-funded and the other one isn't. We better save ours while we can. I want to remind you of a couple of things. First of all, the CERS plan is 50-something% funded, somewhere south of 60% funded. That is horrifically underfunded. There's not a single system, a single pension plan in this state that is well-funded or doing well. By IRS statutes, if these were private companies, they would have been taken over and frozen and disbanded. The payout of benefits would have been stopped by law if these were private companies, every single one of them. And we may take comfort in the fact that CERS is 50-some% funded. KERS was 50-something% funded in 2009. 2009. It's now somewhere between 9 and 16%, depending on which numbers you use. And that's another thing. This idea that, well, we're using numbers to try to make it look worse than it is. I'm using realistic numbers. I'm using numbers that aren't even as good as what we've actually seen. In other words, I'm using numbers that are more in line with what we've seen, I should say, as opposed to wishful thinking. There is no fiduciary responsibility in the same vein that you have with ERISA law related to private pension plans. But without throwing particular individuals under the bus, the reality is what has been done in our pension systems has been criminal. It has been negligent, it has been irresponsible, and it is shameful. And I will be specific on a couple of fronts. The people who are making decisions for the plans that you're a part of and that are sucking the budgets out of your communities as you try to take the monies you have and pay benefit obligations and still have enough to cover everything else you have to do. Some was due to gross incompetence. Some of it was due to willful negligence. And the people who were in charge knew better than to continue to say the ARC was predicated on 4% growth in employees when they knew for a fact we were cutting employees and we've been doing it for 10 years. Not only were they not saying it's zero, they were saying we're growing. That was wrong. And they can blame anything they want on actuaries and say they gave us bad numbers. Shame on the actuaries as well. It wasn't that complicated. Many of you have seen this. Many of you know this. This is why I ran for governor. This is why I'm stepping up to make hard decisions. You think it's fun to be this governor? Who wouldn't want to be the one that kicks it down the road? Truth be told, I could run my term out by kicking this can down the road, telling you you're going to get everything you want and everybody gets what they want and kumbaya, and let this thing blow up on the next person. That's what we've been doing. That gig is up. It's unacceptable. It's irresponsible. It's the wrong thing to do. And I'm telling you, you look in the private sector. UPS is a local employer, a statewide employer. They have over 8,000 employees in Kentucky alone. They literally just this past year froze their pension system. Why? Because their fear of it following the path that we're on. It's 75% funded, and that is a highly profitable and successful company. But demographic reality is their reality as well. And when I'm talking about demographic reality, I'm talking about the fact that you don't have anymore, and you know this, 4, 5, 6 workers for every retiree. And if you were to talk about teachers, for example, you have less than 1.5 active teachers for every retiree. There was an employee who just retired from Kentucky who will make about $80,000 a year for the rest of this individual's life from the taxpayers of Kentucky. 80-something thousand, plus health care. This individual is 41 years old. 41, because you can buy years. These kind of things that you buy years, that you save up and you high 3, it's a charade and you know it. And now you're paying the price. So we give you $1.47, 48, 49, and soon to be far more than 50 cents of it is going to pay obligation to people that don't even come to work anymore in your communities, and that is unacceptable. We are on a path to be ultimately where states like California, in cities like San Jose, where ultimately 90 cents of every dollar was going to pay benefits to retirees. 90 cents. You think your budgets are tight now? These are hard, cold, realistic facts. I wish they weren't. Who wants to be this guy? Who wants to be having this conversation with you? I want to say, kumbaya, I want to go eat these special desserts tonight and jumbo shrimp and grilled vegetables and pretend it's all great. It's not all great. But we can save this. I will say one other thing. What we are trying to do has never been done. We're not going to try to copy the XYZ model or do what they did in some other state or some other county or city. There has never in the history of America been a system as underfunded as ours, and that includes CERS, even as a standalone. There has never been a system as underfunded as ours that has ever been saved by maintaining the exact path it was on. They have failed, and we've seen it in cities like a San Bernardino or a Detroit. States do not have the luxury of declaring bankruptcy, and people say, well, there's an obligation, and so, well, the state better just step up, and they better put that money in there, and they better just get it from where they ever have to get it. Well, I will tell you this. I don't care what number you use. I don't care what assumption you use. It's somewhere between $40 and $80 billion that we owe. I think a realistic number is about down the middle in the low 60s, but truth be told, I would err on the side of being more conservative. I think it's more than that. But I tell you this, we could sell every state park, every vehicle, every building, every pencil that you use at work, everything that the state owns, everything. We wouldn't come close to even hitting a fraction of what we owe in unfunded liability. That is the sobering, harsh reality. And we can pretend that it's just going to magically appear from somewhere. We can pretend we're going to get rates of return that delude us into thinking, see, we don't have to put that much in, but we are bleeding out. And when you end last year with a system that has a couple $2 billion in it, and it had a net negative cash flow of hundreds of millions, you do the math on that one. You do the math on that. If you're losing $300-400 million a year and you had $2 billion, and you're projected to continue to lose at least as much, how many years is it going to take you to bleed out? Not many. And this is for people that are retired right now, let alone those of you that are working toward retirement and other people that work for you, let alone the person who is that future kid who's at Greenup County High School, who wants a job somewhere. Now, that's private sector, but what about the kid who's going to plow the roads? I owe you 3 things. I owe the people of Kentucky 3 things, but you do as well. We owe the people who are retired, who paid their dues, who did what they were asked to do, a sense of comfort that this is actually being addressed for the first time ever in Kentucky. And they are owed this because it's the moral and legal responsible thing to do. So I'm going to deliver to the best of my ability, as is our legislature, with whom I've been having meeting after meeting about this issue. We're going to deliver on that promise. We must. We must deliver on the promise to those of you who are working now, and to those who are not even in this room that you represent and work on behalf of and with as well. Some sense of stability and understanding of what's actually coming. What is the situation? What do we have for a pension system? What can we count on? What should we plan on for our own retirements? You are owed that. You will get that. We owe a third promise to those that are not even yet employed. This is our responsibility, to be able to give people something so that they know, relative to other choices they might have in other places, where else they might go to work and what would be their alternatives. So for those retired, for those working, and for those yet to come, we've got to fix this system. And for those people who have been sweeping this under the rug and sweeping this under the rug, if you want to be outraged and you want to be upset, you should be upset. You should be very upset. The former head of KERS, the director who oversaw this, is a guy named Bill Thielen. Bill Thielen should be in jail. That's a fact. And I don't know who's here from the media, but if this was a private company, if this was a private pension plan, he would be. It has been criminal what was done. And Tommy Elliott, who was the chair of that committee, shame on him. Shame on him for sweeping this under the rug. And then, when I removed him due to his gross incompetence in disregard for the problem you all are dealing with, he sued to get his job back. And without any permission from any of you or the board or anyone in the legislature, Bill Thielen took $50,000 out of your retirement money to pay for private attorneys for Tommy Elliott to sue to try to keep his job riding this thing into the toilet. If that doesn't tick you off, it ought to. This is the type of stuff that I am determined to get rid of. Not just on the pension front. There's a lot of this in Frankfurt. It's irresponsible. It's wrong. We owe you better than that. You owe your people better than that. It's un-American. It's unacceptable. And so I ask for your confidence, because I tell you, I don't have a magic wand. I don't have the ability to go back in time. I don't have the ability to grow money on trees. But I will say this, I understand this problem as well as any governor in America, probably, I'm willing to bet, just by dint of what I've done with my life. I understand it as well or better than most people in this state, regardless of what they do for a living. Does that mean that I have all the solutions? No, it doesn't. But I will tell you this, I understand it well enough to know that we've got to fix it. Time is not our ally. My father used to say that to us when we were kids, and it's true enough. Time is not our ally. We cannot keep kicking this down the road. If we use realistic assumptions, the kinds of rates of returns we actually have the ability over time to get, and if we assume even a 0% growth rate instead of assuming an increase, those two changes alone, which are responsible and financially appropriate, will make the cost for you of contributions, whether you're separate or a part, or a part of KERS, so prohibitive, it will suffocate most of your budgets. So there's two parts we have to think about. This is not lost on me either. I appreciate this resistance. Well, if you go with those realistic numbers, that means the arc has to be bigger. Either I don't make the arc, which is not an option, or else I have to cut everything else in government. Exactly. This is where we are as a state because we have kicked this down the road and kicked this down the road and kicked this down the road. We've got to stop kicking because it isn't going to get better. We're not going to kick it to a place where it's suddenly good. It literally will implode. You can't have one person working, making $40,000 a year at the age of 30, paying somebody who's 41 and is retired for the rest of their life at $80,000 and expect that system to work. It doesn't work. So we need to do two things. We need to fix the system so that you do have a promise that you can bank on and know exactly what it is. But we also need to do it in a way that does not suffocate you in the immediate term. And so finding a way to provide relief and feather in the changes that must be made is not lost on me. I want you to know that. I don't sit in your shoes, but I sit in shoes not unlike them in my particular role. And I wrestle with the same things. And if in fact we don't fix this, it isn't just at the county level, it's at the state level. To give you a rough idea, if we use assumptions that KERS has recently and appropriately, and even though it is belatedly, come to in terms of assumptions, assuming a 0% growth rate, when in fact it still goes down, the number of employees is still going down, assuming 0, assuming rates of return of 5%, which historically over time we've sometimes made, sometimes not. Last year was good, this year's decent. But truth be told, the years prior to that, the 5 years from 11 to 15, they were 4.75% from 2011 to 2015, years when the market was increasing. Our average return for all the plans in those 5 years, 4.75%. So 5% is not a crazy or pessimistic number. Using a 5% number, using a 0% growth rate, using those two facts alone, the additional money that would be required to be put into our plans across the state, this is on top of the $1.2 billion that we had to cut against the weeping and gnashing of teeth to get done last budget session. We would need to put in another $800 to $1.2 billion on top of that, plus the 1.2 again. Where is that going to come from? You think this is lost on me? I do appreciate where you are. These are hard, real numbers. That's just to meet the arc, which means we don't bleed out faster than we already are. That's not to get back above the ground. That's just to not dig deeper into the hole. The only alternative would be to cut everything that people need. For state government, if we exempted the very same things we exempted this last time when we cut 9%, and it was things like SEEK, and it was things like Medicaid, and it was things like Veterans Affairs and things of this sort. The things that all of us would generally agree we should try to preserve those. If in fact we kept those same things sacrosanct and faced this coming up in 2018, just to meet the arc using those assumptions, which in my estimation are still not as conservative as they should be given our dire circumstances, it's not going to be 9. And bear in mind that 9 doesn't get regenerated. That 9's already gone. We're already 9% less on those areas that we cut. On top of that new base level, we're going to have to cut 34% just to meet the arc. That's a hard reality. Where's it going to come from? Let's just say you put SEEK formula in there. That's sacrilege. You put the SEEK formula in there, it would still be 17% of SEEK and everything else that wasn't previously exempted. Let's say you put in everything else that you literally have the ability to put in there. Everything that we don't federally have a mandate not to touch. It would be just about 15%, 14.8, 14.9% from the current floor that we are at. That's where we are. That is where we are. Is this fun? No. Are you going to earn your money like you've never earned it in the days and weeks and months ahead? Yes, you will, as will I. But this is what we were elected to do. This is what people are counting on us to do. This is what they are trusting us to do. And we've got to do it because somebody has got to do it. And the time for it to be done is now. And so you have my commitment that I am doing everything in my power to ensure that as an alternative to having to cut literally everything that is near and dear to us, every road, every textbook, every piece of equipment for your firefighters or whatever the case might be, the things that matter, if we don't want to gut those, we are going to have to deal with the reality of the situation we are faced with and still deliver on 3 promises. That is my commitment to you. I'm confident that with your help, with your assistance, with your ability to come alongside and be an ally to the absolute extent that you can be to figuring out how to come out the other end of this tunnel so that it does not implode, which for me would be the easiest thing to do is just walk away and say, good luck to you. I'll be gone when it happens. Good luck to you. I'm not going to do that. I'm convinced we can get this done and we will get it done, and I'm determined to get it done because we are Kentucky.